here, Elder Harris. She was telling me a little bit of your history. You guys been here almost over 30 years and have a ministry that's pretty much on a national level because you got churches all over the place, right? And so praise God for that. I want to congratulate you guys for spreading the gospel and doing what you were called to do with that, right? I'm excited to share this information with you. What I'm about to share with you, in my opinion, has the potential to absolutely change your life. And I don't say that, in a hyperbole, way. I say that in a most humble and convicting way. I've seen so many hundreds of people that have learned this information, have applied it to their lives, and they've been able to create not only financial dignity for themselves and their families, but they've positioned themselves to be able to take advantage of more opportunities that God has brought their way because they've been able to be better stewards of the opportunities. Does that make sense? And so now some of the things that we're going to go over are basically some issues that we've found that a lot of Americans go through when they're trying to get ahead financially in life, right? And so I call them the 7 gotchas, 7 gotchas of money, and they're literally pretty much annihilating a lot of people's financial future. Now, it's not all gloom and doom. I'm going to let you know that right now. I'm here to bring good news, right? And so I will kind of weave that in through this conversation. However, one of the things that I do want you guys to keep in the back of your mind as you listen to this information is I want you to kind of, just keep it in your spirit. Who do I know that can truly benefit from this information? Because as you gain the information and you kind of pay attention to it, you're going to probably start thinking of people that have either gone through them or that are about to go through them, and you just introducing them to this information, you can literally save them, not just spiritually, but from a financial perspective. Does that make sense? Good. So we're going to talk about these 7 gotchas, 7 things that are getting in the way of people experiencing financial peace of mind. And the first one is gotcha number 1, which is debt, right? And in this case, I call it bad debt, okay? Now, the reality is that unfortunately, many people in America are up to their eyeballs in debt, right? And because of that, they can't save for the future. They can't get ahead financially. They can't take advantage of opportunities when they show up. One of the things that a lot of the wealthy people do, how many of you guys remember what happened in 2007, 2008? You remember, Apostle? Yeah, the real estate market crashed, right? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But the reason I'm mentioning that now here is because the wealthy, part of the reason why they become wealthy or they've become wealthy is because they were positioned to take advantage of those opportunities. Because when the markets crashed, real estate was on sale, right? 10 cents to the dollar, pretty much, and a lot of other things were on sale. I remember one of my business partners picked up a guy literally brought over to his office a Bentley, right? He brought over a Bentley, and he's like, listen, man, going through hard times. Here's literally what he told him. My partner was like, listen, I'm not really looking for a car or anything. The guy's begging him to buy the car from him. And he even tells him, you know what, go ahead and insult me. He literally told him, go ahead and insult me, And, but he was able to buy the car like for 30% of what it cost. And a week later, he was able to flip it and make an extra 40 grand on just a deal. Right? And so simply because he was positioned to be able to do that. Does that make sense? And so a lot of times debt keeps people from doing that. Now, here's the thing I do want to say about this. There's what I would call good debt versus bad debt. Bad debt takes money out of your pocket and decreases your net worth each and every month. Good debt puts money in your pocket and increases your net worth each and every month. I'll give you an example. What's a good debt could be a mortgage. Right? A mortgage in a house is debt, but yet it could be good debt. Does that make sense? You're leveraging it to increase an asset, right? When you buy businesses also, that could be good debt, right? You can get a loan to buy a business, but that business is creating a cash flow opportunity. And so that's good debt. And it's also debt that you can write off, by the way. Yeah, so you get a subsidy from Uncle Sam because you're using it to create an income generating asset, which can also, I mean, there's so many other benefits and blessings from that. Imagine if you had a business that you purchased, but now you're employing 5, 6, 7, 10, 20, 30 people. So you're literally giving people jobs. That's a good thing, wouldn't you agree? Right? So keep that in mind, right? Not all debt is bad debt. There's a place for debt. You just got to be a good steward and learn how to use it. Okay? 3 biggest debts that are crushing most American: personal and business loans, bad business loan, credit cards, and student loans. Right, the biggest of all right now. There's literally $1.2 trillion in student loan debt in America today, and it's a very debilitating situation because a lot of our kids have a lot of that debt, and the side of the problem with that is they can't find a job to save their life. So they got 70, 80, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, $120,000 of student loan debt. Well, how do you pay that if you can't find a job? Does that make sense? And so, 40 years ago, a student loan would have been considered an asset. Today, it's more of a liability than it is an asset, right? Now, gotcha number 2 is losses. What do I mean by losses? People putting their money where out of no fault of their own, they wake up one day and half their money's gone, right? So we were talking about 2007, 2008, right? I want to share a quick story with you. I've got a relative of mine. She's actually, I married into her family. My wife and I have been together 19 years. She's my wife's relative. So I've known her 19 years. And this young woman, her and her husband, they did something they felt were the wisest things they can do to get ahead financially early on when they first got married. They got married when they were like 22, 23 years old. First thing they did, they bought 5 2-flat unit buildings all in the northwest side of the city of Chicago. Now, they didn't buy those their very first year. They bought like one every other year, right? So first 10 years of marriage, they got 5 2-flat units. And over a 20-year period, these 5 2-flat unit buildings accumulated a little over about $1.1 million worth of equity. Okay? At the same time, they were very good savers. He worked for a big investment firm in downtown. She worked for she was a paralegal for a big lawyer firm, and she saved a ton of money in a Roth IRA, and he saved a bunch of money in a 401k. Okay? So around the same 20-year period, they accumulated a little over $680,000 in their savings. So they got a $1.1 million in equity, $680 in savings. They're doing pretty good, right? Until 2007 came around. 2007, real estate market crashes. They went from having $1.1 million in equity to having $200,000 in equity. Fast forward to 2008, they went from having $680,000 saved up, and when the markets crashed, they ended up with about a 180. So literally in 2 years, they lost what took them over 20 years to accumulate, right? And I remember seeing her probably maybe about a year ago, and her dream has always been, since I've known her for these 19 years, that she was going to retire when she was 60. Right? Since she was young, that was her plan. That was her vision. That was what she was going to do. So we were in a family gathering, and I walk up to her, and I was very excited. And I said, "Hey, how you feeling? You must be over your head in excitement." She goes, "What are you talking about, Rudy?" I said, "Hey, as long as I've known you, you've always been bragging you're going to retire at 60. I know your birthday's about 6 months away. How you feeling?" And she says, "Are you kidding me, Rudy?" She goes, "Everything that I had for retirement was in those buildings and in that Roth and 401k. She goes, "I'll be lucky if I can retire at 70. Right? And so part of that's a big problem, wouldn't you agree? And by the way, I wish she was not that I wish her any bad, but it would be a little bit comforting if she was the only story like that. But there's millions of people that experience that during that phase, right? I'm sure you guys might know of some, right? Maybe even happened to you. And so part of what we teach people is how to avoid that. Now, here's the main thing that you need to understand about losses when it comes to the markets. It's not if the markets are going to crash, it's when the markets are going to crash. When you look at the history right now, and by the way, this does not include the last one that we had. So here, if you look, there have been literally 10 market crashes since 1901. The average loss, or the average crash, happens every 11 years. And the average loss is 47%. Okay? Now, what year are we in? That's 11 years from when? 2008. Interesting. Interesting. Right? So the reality is that it's going to happen here very soon. And either people are ready for it and they're protected against it, or they're not. Does that make sense? Now, here's the problem with losses. When you experience a loss, you got to work double time just to get ahead of it. For example, let's say somebody loses 20% in the markets, right? Well, if they lose 20%, how much do they have to gain to get back to even? They have to gain 33, right? So let me use simpler math. Let's say that we had $100,000 in the markets and we lose 50%. We're at how much? We're at 50 grand, right? How much do you need to make to get back to 100 grand? You got to make 100% on your 50 grand just to get back to even. Does that make sense? So now, can somebody make 100% growth? Sure, but what do they have to do? They have to take on more risk. The very first thing that got them in the problem they're in. Does that make sense? So that's the problem with experiencing a loss, is that it sets you back. I mean, a lot of the people that lost money in 2018 or in 2008, it's 2019 and they're barely recovering. They've lost 11 years. They've lost 11 years of their life, right? And now that might be, that might be a little bit more bearable when you're 24, but when you're 60, right? We ain't got time for that, right? So that's the problem with losses. So how can I avoid losses in the market? That's a good question, right? Is that even possible? Well, the way that you do that is by using what we call indexed products. Okay? Indexed products, they allow you to have maximum upside growth potential while contractually guaranteeing you never lose a penny when the markets tank. For example, let's look at this right here. Let's say somebody started with $100,000 back in 1999, right? The markets tanked in 2000. And then they picked up again. And then here they are in 2007. That's when the markets crashed again, right? This would be the normal market. Now, the green line is what is called an index strategy. So when the markets go up, right, you grow. But when the markets tank, you flatline. So you protect all of the previous growth that's in that account. Does that make sense? Now notice when the markets pick up again in 2002, the green line starts picking up again. When the markets tank in 2007, the line flatlines. So you don't make any money during downtimes, but you also don't lose any of the previous growth. That's very powerful. And then when the markets pick up again, you pick up again. So think about it. That's a 10-year period, right? 11-year period. Which one would you prefer to have? 96 grand or 202 grand? I mean, it's a rhetorical question, right? I wouldn't expect you to answer the wrong answer there. But does this make sense, guys? Good. This is exactly what we teach people on how to protect their hard-earned dollars, right? Especially for retirement, to send their kids to college, to buy homes, whatever their financial goals are, okay? Gotcha number 3 is inflation, right? Inflation. Here's the thing about inflation. Look at this chart, guys. They've been tracking it since 1913, and this is only 100 year period. We're in 2019, but in 100 years, inflation has grown 2,200+%. Isn't that crazy? If you had a dollar that you would have had back in 1901, would have bought you what $100 buys you today. Isn't that crazy? You got to spend $100 today to buy what a dollar would have bought you 100 years ago. Okay? And so, quick story. I was talking to this young girl at my church. I was in the foyer. And now she's about 21 years old. So we're having a conversation. And she was asking me some questions. And I said to her, hey, whatever happened to penny candy stores? Right? I'm like, man, I remember when I was a kid, kitty corner to my school, I'd go. This Polish man owned the penny candy store. I'd go with $1. I'd buy 95 pieces of candy, pay 5 cents in tax, come out with a big old bag of candy. Right? And so I'm telling her this story, right? And she's looking at me, and she's like, and then she goes, I'm sorry, Mr. Ortiz, what's a penny candy store? I was like, man, I feel really old right now. You know? But this 21-year-old doesn't know what a penny candy store is. You know why? Because inflation got rid of it. Right? Ask her what a dollar store is. Ask her what a Five Below is. She probably knows that. Does that make sense? Her kids will probably not know what a $5 store is. They might know what a 20 and below is. A 25. That's what's happening with inflation. Right? And so here's the thing about inflation. When you average it out, it averages out to about 3.22% per year. Okay? That's the average growth of inflation per year. So what does that mean to you and I? Right? You're like, well, Rudy, what does that mean? That means that our cost of living doubles every 20 years. Every 20 years, our cost of living doubles. So the same life that you're living today, same house, same food, same gas, same clothes, same neighborhood, same everything, is going to cost you twice the amount of money in 20 years. It's pretty sobering, huh? So what can we do to avoid that, right? What can we do to stay ahead of inflation? Well, you want to make sure that you're doing two things. You want to make sure that you're saving money. But more importantly, you want to save your money where it's growing at 5 to 8% average every single year so you can stay ahead of inflation. Does that make sense? If inflation's growing at 3.22, but your money's growing at 5 to 8%, you're doubling up on it. You're always ahead of it. Okay? The second thing is that you need to make sure that your personal income is growing at 5 to 8% per year. In other words, your take-home pay from your job is growing every year at 5 to 8%, right? Now, most of you are like, well, Rudy, that might be a problem. Right? Is everybody here getting 5 to 8% raises at their jobs? No, most people aren't, right? Matter of fact, when you compare this to the last 20, so from 1990 to 2015, right? If you compare all of the costs, for example, the cost of a home, back in 1990, you could have bought a regular home for about $110,000. That's median cost nationwide. I'm talking maybe like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. 110 grand. Today, the average median price for that is 220. Okay? A car, you could have bought a brand new car, guys. Brand spanking new, 0 miles, still smells like new. Nobody sat in it, just you. Right? You bring it home brand new for less than 10 grand. And I'm talking like a sedan, right? Average sedan. Today, that car costs $33,000. Brand new. Right? Raising a child from 0 to 18 years old. And by the way, I'm not talking, extravagant private school. I'm talking the bare necessities. Food in their belly, clothes in their back, roof over their head. Right? The basics, maybe a couple little things here and there. To raise them from 0 to 18 years old back in 1990 would cost you $115,000 from 0 to 18. Today, try $245,000 to raise one of them. Yeah, I ran into a guy, this is like 4 or 5 days ago. He had like 5 kids. I was like, man, you must be a millionaire. You sure gonna need it, man. Kids are expensive, right? So now, keep all of that in mind. College, by the way, in 1990, you could have gotten a 4-year college degree for about 30 grand, all 4 years. Today, try $94,000. Yeah, isn't that crazy? So everything's gone up about 200+%. Now, the median salary back in 1990 for the average American was $52,775. That was the median salary. That's the average American made, right? Everything went up 200+%. We would assume that everybody's salary went up 200+%, yes? Can anybody guess what's the median salary for somebody back in 2015? How much? A little bit more, 54,000. So it went from 52,000 to 54,000. So while everything went up 200+%, people's salary went up 2%. That's a problem, wouldn't you agree? So that's the reason why you want to make sure that your income is growing at 5 to 8% per year. Now, the good news is I'm going to show you how anybody here can control that. You can control that. You don't have to depend on a boss. You don't have to depend on the government. You don't have to depend on anybody to control this. I'm going to show you guys how you can do this here in a minute, okay? Now, here's the main thing with this. Both of these things must happen while avoiding the next gotcha. And let me see which one. Did I get these mixed up? Gotcha number 3. All right, I guess, well, I flipped these. Let me talk to you about linear income. So linear income means people are trading time for dollars, right? People are trading time for dollars. Nothing wrong with it, okay? Except for the fact that it's very hard for Americans today in 2019 to get ahead financially with this type of income model, okay? Now, what we encourage people to do is to create a leveraged income model. But here's the problem with a linear income trap, right? You're trading the time, you get the paycheck, and without time, if you don't trade time for it, you don't make any money. Does that make sense? It's also the cheapest labor, if you will. It's the cheapest way that you can make money. It's not the most leverage, right? It's always by time. Everybody wants to pay you the least amount of money for your time, right? I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they're like, Rudy, you know, they don't want to give me a raise, so I'm going to do the least amount of work, you know, that I have to do to keep my job. And I said, okay, but here's what you need to understand. They're paying you the least amount of money so that you don't quit. Yeah. So who's getting who here, man? You know what I mean? So the situation with this is, how do we escape the linear income trap? By the way, here's the problem with the linear income trap. There comes a day for every single one of us where we cannot trade time anymore for money. You cannot, not, even if you wanted to, you can't, because either your health doesn't allow you, your energy doesn't allow you, right? Or whatever circumstances you're in don't allow you. If you are the machine that makes money, when this machine breaks down, you don't make any money. Does that make sense? So, by the way, take care of the machine. That's part of your stewardship, right? That's part of your stewardship. However, here's how you want to overcome this. You want to create what I call leveraged income, okay? Now, leveraged income has 3 different components to it, okay? This is very, very powerful, guys. 3 different components. The first one is high pay for little time. High pay for little time. Kind of like a doctor or a lawyer or somebody who sells high-ticket sales, right? People that get paid big money for little time, okay? Now, I'll give you an example of this in our firm, okay? Part of what our firm does, we're obviously, as you guys can see, we're a financial education. We teach people the rules of money, how to get and stay out of debt, how to save money in tax-advantaged vehicles that don't lose value when the markets tank. And we show people how to have income if they can't work because of health issues. We're going to talk more about that here in a minute. But a big part of what we do is we teach people how to create this leveraged income by owning a business. Okay? By owning a business. you can create leveraged income. And now if you have a business that pays you high pay for per unit, is even better, right? So for example, like a doctor or a lawyer, they might make $3, $4, $5, $10,000 in an hour, right? And that's great money. I'm sure anybody take 10 grand an hour all day, every day, right? Twice on Sunday. Amen. I can tithe more, right? So, but here's the problem with that. They're still trading time for dollars. So if there's a day where he can't work for that $10,000, he makes zero. So that's just one element, is high pay for little time. The second one is passive income. Passive income is where you have a system. That system can be comprised of either technology or other people, right? How many of you guys have a job? You work for a company. You work for somebody else. Okay. That company has a system. You are part of that system. Does that make sense? They're leveraging you. They give you X amount of dollars per hour, or they give you a set salary, right? But that X amount of dollars, for example, let's say they're paying you $25 an hour. Nothing wrong with that if you accept it. But out of the $25, out of the hour that you're giving them, they might be making $125 an hour. They keep the 100, they give you 25. Does that make sense? That's leverage. By the way, don't hate on them, right? Be them, emulate them, learn to do what they're doing, right? So that's passive income, is other people's networks, other people's technology. And then the third one is residual income, where you do the work once and you get paid over and over and over and over and over again, right? So, young lady in the back, you raised your hand. You said you have a job. What is it that you do, honey? You're a nurse. My mom's a nurse. So there's a hero in the room, y'all. My mom is my hero. 42-year career nurse, RN, retired her 6 years ago. She absolutely, I adore that woman. She just loved people. Let me ask you a question. How long you been a nurse? 30. You must have started when you were 10. Seriously, you don't look like you would have been 30 years anyway, that's besides the point. So 30-year nurse, let me ask you a question. What if the job or the hospital or the network that you work in, they said, hey, listen, for every client or patient that you take care of, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars, okay? And for every month that client stays, or that patient stays healthy, we're going to give you X amount of dollars. Would that be pretty cool? Is that how they pay you now? No, but she's like, but I'll take it, right? So that's what I mean about residual income. You do the work once, but you get paid over and over and over and over again, right? So what do I encourage you guys to do? I encourage you to find a model that gives you all three of these things. By the way, notice that, granted, I use doctor and lawyer as an example, and for those you might need a degree and stuff like that. But the reality is there's plenty of opportunity out here where you don't have to be all educated to make this money like this. You know what I mean? I'm going to share something with you guys about me at the end so that I can prove my point. But this is exactly what we teach people how to do in our firm. For example, I'll give you in our firm, I've got my associate here, Julio. Julio and I just finished doing a client appointment with a young lady who he knew from a previous job. And she came in, she has a sister who's in special needs, and she wanted to set up something for her future. And so as I was talking to her and just asking her questions, I said, sure, we can help your sister, but let's talk about you. How you doing? How's your retirement going? What are you looking at? Long story short, she didn't really have much, and we were able to show her how we can help her create a $35,000 a year tax-free income starting at 67, and it increases 5% per year until she's 120 years old, right? She wasn't expecting that. So we helped her. She's 40 years old. She does that. She has zero for retirement. And I showed her how she can do this. She could start with a couple $100 a month, and she's going to have a guaranteed lifetime income stream tax-free. And you could tell that she was very taken back by what we were able to do for her. Super grateful, right? Well, get this. That case will make Julio $1,800. How long did it take us, Julio? An hour's time. Is that pretty good money? High pay for little time. Does that make sense? So, gotcha number 5 is taxation. Taxes. Okay, so how do I say this? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. The tax code in America was really created for the benefit of business owners and investors. It was never created for the benefit of W-2s or self-employed people. How do you know this? When you look at, I wish I had something to draw on, but that's fine. Think about a quadrant, okay? Four squares. On the left side, top of the quadrant is an E, okay? That's for employee. On the bottom left is an S. That's for self-employed, okay? These guys are on the left side of the quadrant. Now, the E and the S, they are in a linear income model, like I showed you guys. They trade time for dollars, okay? However, on the right side of the quadrant, you have a B at the top and an I at the bottom. So the B at the top is a business owner. The I at the bottom is an investor. Does that make sense? Business owners and investors, they have exponential income. They have leveraged income, right? They have systems and processes. Their income does not depend on their time being traded for it. Does that make sense? They have systems that they trade for that. Now, 95% of the wealth in the world, really, is owned by the right side of the quadrant. Business owners and investors. 5% is owned by the left side of the quadrant, employees and self-employed people. Okay, here's the crazy part. Did you know that on average, the people on the left side of the quadrant pay 40% more in taxes than the people on the right side of the quadrant? Yeah, employees and self-employed people pay an average of 40% more in taxes than business owners and investors? Yeah. Why? Because they're in a different tax system. Employees and self-employed people are on a income tax system. Okay? Quick story. I have a 25-year-old son. And so he got his first gig when he was 18 years old. He was helping run the kitchen at a retirement living facility. So you know how usually when you go to when you first start at a job, you usually got to work like 2 weeks and then you get your first paycheck. So he works his 2 weeks and he comes by my office. He's like, "Hey, Dad, can you take me to the job to go get my first paycheck?" I said, "Sure, no problem." So he jumps in the car. It's about 5 minutes from my office. We're driving there, and he's super fired up and excited sitting in the car. He's like, "Dude, I'm about to get paid. I'm going to buy me some new kicks. I'm taking my girlfriend here. We're going to the movies. We're going to do this and all that." He's super excited, right? I park in front. He jumps out. He's skipping over to the office. Takes about 5 minutes to be in there. And when he comes out, he's walking really, really slow. And he's got this envelope in his hand. And he keeps, like, he's got this really weird look on his face just looking at the envelope. And he comes into the car and he looks at the envelope. He looks at me. He looks at the envelope. He looks at me. He goes, "Who the heck is FICA, man?" "Dad, they're ripping me off. Look it says that my check is, or I got paid this much, but the check is made out for this much. What happened to the money in between?" And I said to him, "Welcome to the employee world, son." Right? He's like, "Dad, they didn't even ask me if they can take the money." I mean, he was traumatized. That's the income tax system. Business owners, they're on a different system. Did you know that? They're on the business and investors, they're on a capital gains corporate tax system. Let me explain to you how that system works. If you're an employee, you make $50,000. Let's assume you're at a 20% tax bracket. They take out 10 grand, right? And you net 40 grand, and that's what you take home. They don't even ask you. That's what you spend. That's what you pay your bills on. If a business owner makes $50,000, You know what he or she gets to do? They get to spend everything. They deduct it, and whatever's left, that's what they pay taxes on. Isn't that interesting? That's why I tell people, start a small business. Put the rules of the money game on your side, right? Any sports fans here of any kind? Any sports fans? You're a sports fan, Elder? What kind of sports do you like, ma'am?
Volleyball, baseball,
Oh, perfect. Let's talk about baseball, okay? Any other baseball fans in the room? Cool. Any Bears fans in the room? Man, the Bears just started preseason. They lost that game. Let's hope they do better, right? But anyway, I'm a huge Bears fan. Let's talk about baseball. Let me ask you a question. If you were going to play baseball, would you play to win? Of course. Look at the look on her face. You can tell she's competitive. She's like, heck yeah, we're going to play to win, man. And I'm going to beat you too. Right? I would agree. Let me ask you another question. If you're going to play baseball and you're going to play to win, Elder, is it important for you to know the rules of the game of baseball in order for you to win the game? Could you potentially lose the game if you don't know the rules? Same thing with money. Money's a game. And most people don't know the rules. They're playing the game because there's only 4 positions in the game of money. Employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. Those are the only 4 positions. Most people are on the left side of the quadrant, and they're coming in excited to the game, and bam, 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 they're getting socked. And they're like, man, I'm trying to win. What's going on? They don't know the rules. Yes, ma'am. Employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor are the only 4 positions in the game of money. Most people simply don't know the rules. My firm exists to teach people the rules. Not only to teach them the rules, but to surround them with the best championship players in the game. And to give them the best coaches that can teach them how to strategically win the game. Does that make sense? Because let me ask you, if you were playing a sport, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, would you want to have a championship team around you? And would you want to have the best coaches in the game? Of course. So I encourage you to find that, right? So, and by the way, you know what? I think I explained all of that in my quadrants. Yeah, employees pay the highest percentage of taxes. Big business and investors pay the least. This is Robert Kiyosaki. And this is the quadrant that I was talking about, right? Tax percentage is paid per quadrant. Believe it or not, self-employeds are getting hammered. Yeah, they pay on average most, right? So what we teach people is, so part of what we teach people at our firm is how to go from here to there to there, organically, right? How to build a business on the side without it interfering with what they're currently doing so that they can now offset their taxes, and they also create a new income stream, which most people need. They need more money. Would you agree? Now, when it comes to investing your money, money gets treated differently as far as taxes, right? These are what we call the tax buckets. So you got the first tax bucket, which I call the tax now bucket, right? Tax now bucket, the money that you put into this bucket is already taxed. The money as it grows every year gets taxed, and then when you pull out the money, it gets taxed. This is the reason why I call it tax now, because it doesn't matter what stage the money's in, it's going to get taxed now at that stage. Does that make sense? Great. Some people, when they come to know that, they're like, man, that's not cool, right? Yeah, let me go find another bucket. So then they look to the tax deferred bucket. The tax deferred bucket is the tax later bucket. Tax later bucket are vehicles where you put in before tax dollars. The money grows tax deferred. However, when you pull out the money, you get whacked in taxes. Okay? Now, let me ask you guys a question. Does anybody here know where Plano, Illinois is? You know where Plano, Illinois is? You've been there? What's in Plano? Not a lot, right? Bunch of corn land. Yeah, it's a bunch of corn land, right? So let's pretend that we all live in Plano, Illinois. You guys own 10 acres of land, and you're about to plant some corn. Okay? Now, Uncle Sam comes and says, hey, guys, death and taxes kind of guaranteed to everybody. However, we'll let you choose when you can pay your taxes. Let's say that you're going to you're going to buy $100 worth of corn seeds to plant in your 10 acres of land. Okay? You can pay the taxes on the $100 seeds, plant your crops, grow your crops, harvest a $1 million harvest and sell it for $1 million, and you can keep all of the money. Or you can keep the taxes on the $100 seeds, plant your crops, grow your crops, harvest a $1 million harvest, sell it for $1 million, and pay taxes on the $1 million. When would you prefer to pay your taxes, on the seed or on the harvest? On the seeds? On the seeds? Okay. Let's change that conversation to money. When it comes to these plans, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, traditional pensions, right? Here's what Uncle Sam says to you and I and to every other American. Hey, guys, that $100, that $200 that you're putting into your 401k every pay period, we'll let you slide on the taxes on that, okay? When you're, 65, 66, 67, and you've got $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in there, assuming you don't wake up one day and half your money's gone like 2008, right? Let's just put that to the side. And let's say that you need $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year to live, because remember, what does inflation do to your cost of living? It doubles it every 20 years. So if you're like me, you're 47 years old, and now you're going to retire at 67, and you're living on 70 grand today, you're going to need how much at 67? 140. So if I got to pull out 140, but wait a minute, if I got to pull out 140, I haven't paid taxes on this thing yet, right? So if I need 140, I got to really pull out 180 because I got to pay $40,000 in taxes so I can net my 140. Doesn't sound that attractive, does it? But that's exactly how these plans work. Isn't that interesting? Now, let me ask you guys a question. Why do you think they're set up that way? Well, it's taxes, right? The only one that can collect taxes is the government. Think about this. The government wants their money before we die. Let me tell you how you know. If you were to leave a 401k as an inheritance to your kid or your grandkid, you put them in a very serious taxable problem. The first thing that's going to happen is they have to pay inheritance tax. It's about 25%. So if you leave them 200 grand, 50,000 gone in taxes. Now they've got 150 grand, right? Well, 150 grand left in a 401k is income. So therefore, let's assume they're making 40 grand this year in income. They just inherited $150,000 that puts them in a $190,000 tax bracket. Now they got to pay an extra 37% on that 190 grand. So your 200,000 that you left them, maybe they kept 70 grand of it. That's how you know they want your taxes. Does this make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I would agree that you're being taken advantage of because you're not learning the rules. You got to learn the rules, guys, right? Because the wealthy play this game. They play this game and they play it very well. They know the rules. Not only do they know the rules, they surround themselves with the best coaches and they pay them the best salaries. Right? So again, let's not hate, let's emulate. Right? Now, let's talk about the tax-free bucket. Tax-free bucket are vehicles where you can put in after-tax dollars, so you pay the taxes on the seed, like most of you guys said you would prefer. Right? The money grows tax-free, accumulates tax-free, and you can access the money tax-free. Okay? By the way, let me tell you why that might be a very, very important thing to look at today. Right now, America is $21 trillion in debt. Okay? By the way, that's just the debt that they owe to foreigners and things like that. That does not include obligated money, meaning Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. When you add all of that up, that's another $200 trillion. Okay? America's in some deep trouble here. Let me ask you guys a question. What product or service does the government produce or sell? Savings bonds, yeah, they give you a tax-free thing, right? But the reality is they don't really produce any type of product, right? How do they make their money? How does the government make their money? They tax the people. They tax the people. Yeah. So let's keep with this, right? If the government taxes the people and they're $21 trillion in debt, $200 trillion in obligations, where do you think taxes are going to be 10 years from now? Lower, the same, or higher? Yeah. Right now there's a lot of politicians that are riding on the ticket of, hey, we're not going to raise taxes, we're not going to raise taxes. Yeah, that's great to get votes. What's your plan? Because America's in some problems here. And without raising taxes, or the other option is you can renege on the obligations that you made to your people. And now they're going to burn down America. Does that make sense? So my question to you is, if America's in all this financial trouble, and the only vehicle that they have to bring in income is taxes, and more than likely they're going to raise taxes here probably in the next 5 to 10 years, does it make sense to postpone paying taxes to a time in the history of the world where probably taxes are going to be higher, where you're going to need the money the most, and where you have no deductions? It's a good question. Does that make sense? Most people, what are their deductions in taxes? So their equity in their home, right? Or not the equity, I'm sorry, the interest rate on their mortgage, they can write it off, right? By the way, my business partner, Matt, he was actually scheduled to speak here, and unfortunately he couldn't come. But him and his wife just had a baby. And yeah, they just had, he's 45 years old, he had a baby. And I got him a gift, and it's a onesie. And the onesie says tax deduction. Because you get to write off your kids, right? Now, let me ask you a question. 30 years from now, assuming you do everything with your mortgage, is the house paid off? Should be. So 0 write-off there. Your kid's 30 years old. Can you still write him off? Even if he lives with you, you don't write him off. Yeah. So 2 of the major write-offs that most Americans have, employee, self-employed people, are going to be gone when taxes are probably higher. Does that make sense, guys? So again, does it make sense to put money in vehicles where you're going to be exposed to taxes in the future? It's a good question. So, and then the last one is income and estate tax free are charitable trusts and irrevocable trusts. This is a very powerful thing. You can literally put assets in here, and as long as you give, by the way, a charitable trust, does anybody know how a charitable trust works? So charitable trust, you set up a trust, everything is owned by the trust. With a charitable trust, you are obligated to do one thing: give away a tithe of it. When you give away, and it could be to your church, by the way, hint, hint. Yeah, set up some irrevocable trust, man. Give something to the Lord in your house, and everything else is tax-free. Wow. Imagine that. That's very powerful. Yeah. Absolutely. Did you have a question, honey? Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know if you have like a 401 or a 403, could you transfer everything from that particular, I'm sorry.
I was going to give her my...
I wanted to know if you have a 401 or 403 and everything is diversified. Once it grows in its diversity, can you transfer the majority of the money into the guaranteed area and then pull it out as a rollover for an irrevocable?
Great question. That's a good question. Now, the short answer is yes. However, here's the situation with all of these. When you cross over you got to pay the tax man because it's a different tax lane. Does that make sense? So if you move money from this bucket to this bucket, then Uncle Sam's standing at the door saying, you got to pay your taxes. With that said, depending on where you have the money inside of the tax later bucket and where you're at in your life, it might make sense to do that. It might actually make sense to pay the taxes on the seed and let it grow tax-free. Does that make sense? That all depends on where you're at your life, what stage you're in, how much money you got, what are your plans, and all that stuff. That's why I encourage you. Part of what we do, guys, is we lead with this education, and then we set up one-on-one appointments with people because everybody's in a different situation. Does that make sense, Apostle?
I got a question about the charitable trust.
Yes,
now, you're
ma'am.
saying as long as you give away 10%, so then the other 10% just has to sit, or I don't.
The other
understand that.
90%.
I mean, the other 90% just has to sit.
Not necessarily.
How does that work?
You can put a lot of different things inside of a charitable trust. You can put not just money, you can put real estate, you can put assets, all kinds of different assets inside of the trust. What Uncle Sam says, if this is a charitable trust, you can set it up in a way where as long as you're giving away 10% of the value of that trust, everything else doesn't get taxed.
Okay, so help me understand this. So we could put our homes in the trust.
You can put real estate in there.
Everything we own to avoid
Yes.
taxes.
Yes.
in
Now,
essence.
keep in mind, when you do that, you personally, individually don't own it.
anymore.
The trust
The
owns
trust
it.
owns it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, one of my mentors, he's worth $200 million. Here's what he told me. He goes, Rudy, I own nothing. I control everything.
Exactly.
I own nothing. I have nothing that I personally own in my name. It is all owned by businesses and by trusts. Therefore, also what that does is it protects me individually because if somebody wants to sue me or everything, what are you going to sue me for, man? I ain't got nothing.
How does the inheritance work on that? How do you transfer that once it's in the trust?
Great question. So it all depends on how the trust itself is structured, but you can leave it to either an entity like a church, or you could leave it to an individual. Now, that's where once you get to that stage, depending on the type of assets that are in there, there might be some taxable. For example, if you put like 401k stuff in there and stuff like that, right? But if you leave real estate, there's a way around that. If you leave life insurance, always Section 101 of the IRS code. Any product that's in life insurance or an annuity, a Roth, is going to pay out 100% tax free. Yeah.
With that trust, if you have a home that you will net a lot of money, you can still put it in that and still sell it. But I think they have it where you have the one in a lifetime where you don't have to pay taxes on that major real estate.
So the only thing, now, let me put a disclaimer. I'm not a real estate professional. I know a little bit about it.
It's tax. You have one time if you sell a house, not to pay those taxes. Once in a lifetime.
Right. So I know with real estate, if you do what's called a 1031 exchange, anybody familiar with a 1031 exchange? So let's say that you have a property. The property goes up in value. You can sell that property and not pay the taxes on the growth, but the caveat is you have to buy another property. So you have to use the money to invest in a bigger real estate. That's how you can avoid through a 1031 exchange. That's the only one that I know of that would allow you to circumvent taxes that way. Yeah, exactly.
If you would still have to do that if you had it in this charitable one?
No, if you put it in the charitable trust, remember, you're transferring ownership to the trust, right? So the trust owns it. You don't personally own that property anymore. It's going to be owned by, what's the name of this church? Liberty Chapel Trust, hypothetically, right? And so now that property, all its growth and everything that its value, its asset, is tax-free. Now, the entire trust is going to have a total accumulated value, right? So you might have real estate, you might have money, you might have cars, you might have all kinds of things in this trust. There's a certain value to that. That value every year you got to give away 10%. Yes. Does that make sense?
So I think what she was asking about, how do you sell out of the trust?
Well, you can certainly break the trust unless it's an irrevocable one, right? So if you set up an irrevocable trust, then it's irrevocable. There's nothing you can do. Once it's in there, it's done. But if it's a normal charitable trust, you can certainly come out of it. Depending on the assets that you have in there, and if it's grown significantly, then you're going to create a tax liability. Yeah.
So what's the purpose of the irrevocable trust? What's the benefit? What's the pros and what's the cons of it?
So, and by the way, what I would encourage you guys, a lot of these questions that you're asking are more like a tax attorney, right? Tax attorney questions. I only know this because I've been working in the world for 7 plus years. But the benefit of an irrevocable trust is that if I want to make sure that this asset pays out in perpetuity, nobody can change it. Thank you so much. Nobody can break that trust. So if I want to make sure that the money's left to the church for 100 years, I'd create an irrevocable trust. So that maintains legacy. Does that make sense? The future people, your grandkids, or the people that haven't been born yet, they can't change that 7 years from now where you're not here. That's the benefit of an irrevocable trust.
My husband asked the question. He wants to know whether the government frowns on individuals being executors of a charitable trust.
If the government frowns on what?
Individuals being executors of a charitable trust.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure if they frown on an individual being. I know that an individual can be, as well as an entity, a corporation or a 501c3 like a church. They all can be entities or executors in an irrevocable trust. So if it's a corporation or an entity like a 501c3, then you have a board. They're the ones who make the decisions. Does that make sense? Good. Any other questions with this? You guys are awesome. Asking cool questions. Cool. All right, so gotcha number 6, health changes. All right? People not being ready financially for a major health change in their life. That's a big issue, okay? Let me tell you a quick story. I want you guys to meet Manny. Manny is a client of mine. He's been my client for about 6 years now. About 6 years. 2 years in, Manny was 53 years old, and he goes in for a routine doctor checkup only to end up getting a bombshell announcement that he's got stage 3 prostate cancer. Okay? Immediately, the doctor starts talking to him about treatment, and based on the level of his health, the severity, his doctor tells him he's got to do 3 rounds of chemo, 3 rounds of radiation. Guy goes home, tells his wife, calls me that next morning. He's telling me the story. He goes, Rudy, this thing hit me like a bombshell. I got stage 3 prostate cancer. Doctor tells me I got to do 3 rounds of chemo, 3 rounds of radiation. He goes, I've got a really big problem with that, man. I've seen people go through that type of treatment, and it's not pretty. It usually takes a huge toll on your health. He goes, I'm going to go get a second opinion. However, I've been just thinking here, praying, asking God for wisdom. What do I do, man? Because if I don't get this treatment, I could die. But if I do take this treatment, how do I work and provide for my wife and 2 kids if I can't work? So we're talking about this, and I'm just in shock that he's telling me this. But then he asked me a question. He goes, that plan that you guys set up for me 2 years ago, Rudy, if I remember correctly, You told me that if I get any type of critical, chronic, terminal, critical injury, some form of disability or disease, that I can accelerate anywhere between 50 to 90% of the money and get that money today tax-free while I'm alive. Is that correct? And I said, you're absolutely right. Right? So he had a plan, and it was an insurance-based plan. Okay? It's an insurance-based plan. Let me ask you guys a question. When does life insurance pay out? When you die, right? It's not for me, it's for my wife and my kids, right? What a lot of people don't realize is that life insurance has evolved a great deal over the last decade, where you and I personally don't have to die anymore from it to be able to access the death benefit. So God forbid if you get a heart attack, stroke, cancer, diabetes, lupus, Crohn's, you can accelerate 50 to 90% of the death benefit and get it today tax-free while you're alive. Think about the ramifications of that. Most people are in the left side of the quadrant. They trade time for dollars. What if they're sick? How do they trade time for dollars? So what are their options? They either have to go get into debt, they have to exhaust whatever savings they have, or they have to go beg church, charity, government, or family for money. Make sense? Having a plan like that preserves their financial dignity. They don't have to go do that. And that's exactly what happened to this young man. We made a phone call for him. 5 business days later, $375,000 were wired straight to his bank account. 2 days later, his wife calls me. And we're talking, and between my wife and I, because my wife helps me run the business, we had been helping him and stuff. And so she just called me to thank me, right? We're talking on the phone. Half a minute into the call, she just starts crying. Crying. And she finally composed herself and she says, Rudy, I thank God that we did this when we did this. She goes, who would have ever thought that Manny would end up with cancer? And to that I said, I mean, Brenda, who plans for cancer, man? Right? It ain't like you and I are having a conversation here and saying, hey, you know what, when I turn 50, I go ahead and get cancer. Or maybe I'll have a heart attack on the side. Says no one ever, right? But does it happen? Happens every day. 70% of bankruptcies in America are due to health changes. Did you know that? 70% of people lose everything they worked so hard for because they weren't planning on getting sick and they're not ready financially for it. Right? Matter of fact, 1 in 3 women will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 2 men will be diagnosed with cancer. Those are the stats, right? Average cost of long-term care in America is $90,000 a year. That's assisted living facilities average $3,400 per month. Home health aides cost $19 to $46 an hour. That's expensive. Does that make sense? So, gotcha number 7. Now, I got good news and I got bad news. What you guys want to hear? I love it. Everybody's always, give me the bad news. I'm like, you're a bunch of pessimists. But I'm in a church, so everybody likes the good news. I like that. Cool. Here's the good news. The 6 gotchas that I just went over with you guys, I can help anybody with them. I can show people how to avoid debt, minimize it. I can show people how to avoid losses, make sure they're contractually guaranteed never to lose a single penny of their money. I can show people how to outpace inflation. I can show people how to minimize, if not completely eliminate taxes legally. Right? I can show them how to have income should, God forbid, they have a health issue. And I can show them how to create leveraged income, right, where they can create a side income that doesn't interfere with what they're currently doing and has the potential to replace their full-time income. So it gives them options. I can help everybody, or almost everybody, with all 6 of those things. The bad news is I don't have anything for number 7. The only thing that I have for number 7 is what I'm doing here with you fine folks today, which is providing a little bit of education and hopefully at the right time, right? But number 7, and I think some of you guys seen it, is procrastination. In other words, people wait too long to do something about those problems. And the next thing you know, gotcha. That's exactly right. They show up in their life, right? They have a health issue. Now they can't work. Now they lose their homes. They're in a bad pickle. They're not making enough money. And so they're constantly now on that rat race, working harder, working more hours, and they're getting taxed up the wazoo. right? The other thing with procrastination, when it comes to these insurance-based plans, and they have these living benefits plans, they all sound great, right? The benefits are pretty cool. Some of you guys are like, wow, that's awesome. And they are. Here's the catch. With insurance-based plans, you invest in them with your premium, but you buy them with your age and your health. That's the issue. Does that make sense? So you invest in them with your premium. You pay for it with your dollars, but you qualify for them with your age and your health. You got to buy them with your age and your health. I've got clients that want them, but they can't have them because they can't qualify. That's exactly right. So the plans are phenomenal. So if that's the case, let me ask you guys a question. When's the best time to get them? Yeah, because the reality is you're not going to be any younger than you are today. Right? Tomorrow, officially, we're older. And statistically, she's trying to reverse that. Come on, Apostle. She got the secret to youth. Yes, ma'am.
And once you have the health issue, pre-existing conditions, you still don't qualify.
That could easily be true. It depends on the type of health issue, though, honey. You know? Got it? Yeah. Yeah, some issues, that's why I said you buy them with your age and your health, you know. And therefore, you want to make sure that you guys have something like this if you can get it, right? Because you never know what can happen in your life, right? And you don't want to put yourself in a position where you now have to go depend on others or exhaust what you have, right? Now, here's the thing. Powerful stuff, right? You guys learned some stuff today? Yeah? Good. Did I add a little bit of value to you guys? Good. Remember the two questions that I asked you when we first got started? Who do you know that can benefit from this? Now you can understand why I asked you that question. Because you would literally become their hero. Some of the people that you know and love and care about are going to go through some of these things. That is a fact. That's a fact of life. But if you introduce them to this message and you help them, you can help them preserve their financial dignity. You can help them preserve the assets that they need to pass on to their families, right? And you can help them have a little bit of financial hope, right? The other question that I asked you is, can you benefit from it, right? I was asked here by Tracy to come, and I was very excited. Thank you so much, Tracy, by the way. Thank you, Apostle, for having me here. But I was very excited to come, and I'm a big believer in honoring relationships. You know, life is all about relationships. Life is all about relationships. It's about your relationship with the Lord and your relationship with your fellow brother, right? And so I'm always big in honoring that. And so I don't want to look past anybody here, right? So what we're going to do, I don't know if you guys have those surveys. Julio, do you have the surveys? What I'm going to do, is it okay if I pass those surveys? I want to pass out these surveys. A couple of things you guys are going to do with these surveys. One, I want you guys to grade my presentation. All right, you're going to be my teachers. You're going to grade. Let me know in the back, what was your biggest takeaway? What is something that, by the way, I'm open to a lot of feedback too. I do these all the time, and I'm always looking to improve them. A lot of what I have here is from feedback from people that I've sat down with like you, and I've just tweaked it and to add value. So let me know anything that you feel that we should cover in these presentations. Write them in the back. Can I get one of those? Just one. I just want one. And so I'll go through this with you guys so you guys, can understand what you want to do here. But I'll ask, and I know they're passing them out. But question number one, here's a question, and by the way, answer these completely honestly. For some of you guys, this might not apply, depending on where you're at in your life. But question number one, do you trust Social Security will be available when you retire? If you're like me, a Gen Xer, 47 and younger, I can tell you, it's not going to be there, man. Yeah. Number two, are you interested in cash accumulation for your future? Do you want to learn how to save money? Number 3, do you currently have any of these followings, right? IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, life insurance, annuities. Circle any of the ones that apply. How much savings do you think you're going to need once you retire? Number 5, if you started planning today, how much could you save? That should actually say a month, not a week. Although if you could save it a week, that'd be phenomenal. Number 6, how comfortable are you with your current plan? If you have a plan for financial independence, retirement, all of those things, be honest there. Number 7, is your current career allowing you to live the lifestyle you want to live? And number 8, which of the two are you more interested in learning more about, our financial concepts and ideas or our opportunity? Let me tell you a little bit more about the opportunity. One of the things that, so guys, I got saved when I was 23 years old. I was a mess. My dad died when I was 11. He was my best friend. Totally transformed my life. I started hanging around with the wrong crowd. My mom became a single parent. She had to work 2 jobs to take care of 3 kids. Ended up getting into gangs and drugs. And I was a mess. And at 23, I got tired. I was tired. And one day, after binging, doing coke and crack cocaine and all that stuff for like 4 days straight, I had stolen my mom's car, guys, right? And I came back on a Sunday. My mom was so mad because she couldn't go to church. And but I was done. I was like done, right? I knew I needed change. And she confronted me, and I was humble. I said, "Ma, I just want to change." She took me to her pastor's house. They prayed for me. And they started calling around because I really needed help. And so they found this rehab program, okay? How many of you guys ever heard of Victory Outreach? So I'm a Victory Outreach alumni, guys. Yeah, I went to Victory Outreach. And I remember when they called, they're like, hey, they have a bed tomorrow. They were going to have an open spot tomorrow. And I told my mom's pastor, no, call him back now. I want to go right now because I know tomorrow I'm going to want to get high. I knew that, I knew enough to do that. And sure enough, I went. And I remember walking up the stairs. I was walking up the stairs, and as I was walking up the stairs to this place, I felt so low, so broken, so dejected. I mean, I was just wondering, how the heck did you get to a place, Rudy, where you have to stop your life and confine yourself to a rehab program, right? Like, this is so not you. And I felt so broken. And I remember the door opened. I knock on the door opens, and it was a young white kid, right? He's probably about my age, 20, 21 years old. He opens the door, and he looks at me. He's got this beautiful smile on his face, and he reaches out his hand, and he says, "Welcome, brother." And he pulled me to him, and he gave me a hug. And immediately, guys, I'm telling you, immediately, that feeling of desperation, that feeling of hopelessness, that feeling of worthlessness, that feeling of loser instantly went away. An amazing sense of peace came over me. And God, I heard a voice in my mind, and it said, "You're in the right place. Stay here." I ended up staying there 12 months. It's a 9-month program. They had to kick me out. I didn't want to leave. No, I don't want to go. I want to stay. But anyway, why am I telling you this? It was in that program that God started doing a work in my life and showing me that he had a purpose for my life. And I started reading the Bible, and I never read a book before that in my life. And I just started reading the Bible, and I couldn't get enough of the Bible, just hunger. My spirit was yearning for it. And that's where God revealed to me that I was called to teach. Because I would open up my mouth, and I would share with people the word. And I'd say, "Hey guys, did you know that the Bible says this and this and this and that? And over here it says this and this and that." And so it seems like God's trying to tell us this. And immediately they were like, "Whoa." And the Bible says that the gift of a man because the body is edified when they exercise the gift. And so I found that out. And a lot of people said, "Well, you're going to be a pastor, right? You're going to be a pastor. You're going to be a pastor. You're going to be a pastor." And I learned coming up in ministry that you obey authority, you obey the leader, right? You submit, you come under. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be a pastor, you know. But as time grew, my teaching got better, and the anointing of God continued to increase in my life. And but I never felt like I wanted to be a pastor. Like all of these people would say I was going to be a pastor, and so I believe in what the Bible says, that a fact is established in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. But God never really told me that, like in my heart. You know what I mean? Like He was telling me. So I was like, okay, everybody's telling me this. But so anyway, one day I started getting more involved. I graduated the home. I actually opened a rehab home for women. We had 18 women at one point, me and my wife. And we were serving full-time ministry. But I also started getting involved in business. And man, I loved business. Absolutely loved business. And everything that I would touch would be blessed and flourish. And so I felt like, man, this is part of my purpose, right? But I was conflicted because everybody was telling me that I was going to be a pastor. And it wasn't until I read this book, it happened, this was back in 2007, I believe, 2006, 2007. This was, guys, years later, like over 15 years later. I read this book by Rich Marshall. It's a book called God at Work. And in that book, it was phenomenal. He took us to Revelation chapter 6, where the Bible says that God has called us to be kings and priests, right? And he starts breaking that down, and then he takes us to Genesis, where it starts talking about the order of Melchizedek, right? So Melchizedek was the first kingly priest in Scripture. And he takes us then to 1 Samuel, 1 Kings, and all that stuff, and he starts showing that he goes, listen, there's 2 offices that God has called. The office of the priest, right? So in the book of 1 Samuel, 1 Kings, God calls the priest directly. Those are direct calls by God, and He separates them. And they're supposed to govern over the spiritual affairs of the people. But He also called the king. The king was a direct calling from God. And the king's job was to do warfare and to govern over the economic affairs of the land. And one of the things that he said in that book that set me free, he said, in today's age in the church, there's a lot of priests trying to be kings and a lot of kings trying to be priests. And this is why they struggle. God at work. That, when I read that, it like leaped out at me. And I realized, man, like I love God. I love God's people. I love His word. I'm certainly a great teacher, and I'm going to teach till the day I die. But this business thing, God has blessed me for it, and I don't have to feel guilty about it. I don't have to feel guilty about having a business that prospers and makes money. I don't have to feel guilty that I can be a millionaire. I don't have to feel guilty if I drive a nice car. I don't have to feel guilty that I have options and choices to give better than other people. Doesn't make me better than them. Does that make sense? And so that set me on a different journey in life. And today, you know, I consider myself a kingdom leader, you know, a kingdom marketplace leader. And so I love doing these things. I love teaching God's people. And I'm praying for the church to rise up more kingdom-minded people. People that can function in the marketplace and go take over territories for the kingdom of God, right? The church that I attend is, how many of you guys are familiar with New Life Covenant? New Life Covenant Ministry, Pastor Choco. Well, John Hanna is actually our daughter church. Yeah, Pastor John Hanna was a daughter church. He submitted under Pastor Wilfredo de Jesus for like 8 years, and then he went and opened up the church. And his church is actually bigger than our mother church. And the mother church is about 14,000. I think that Hannah's like at 18 or 19,000 people right now. But anyway, one of the things that I love about that church, and I see it here too, is they teach this kingdom stewardship. And like literally, guys, you come to our place, and they own the entire block. Like the church owns 2 blocks of real estate. They own centers. They're feeding the homeless. They're doing all these amazing things. right? And it's because there's some kingdom market people there that believe in that. Yeah, and so anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about me. By the way, guys, here's the crazy part about me. I never went to college. I don't even have a high school diploma. But I make more money than doctors today. But I have the Holy Ghost. It's God's grace. I don't take any credit for that. I give God all the glory for that. But what I'm saying, man, is a, young 23-year-old crack addict can end up here speaking to you guys today. Be encouraged, man. God has a purpose for your life. And you guys are amazing people. You're doing amazing things here, right? So anyway, thank you so much for your time, guys. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you learned something. I hope I added some value to you. I want to come back and visit your church. Just as I just love the spirit here, and it's a cool place. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah, if you guys have any questions now, I'm going to be around for a little bit. So if you guys have any questions, I'll stick around and answer them. And if you want, we can set up some follow-up appointments while we're here as well. Right? You guys set those up with Tracy. She has access to my calendar, to my wife, and we'll set those up. By the way, Tracy, make sure you let Rosie know we're giving priority, because you know how my calendar gets. But I want to make sure I serve you guys well. But yeah, I'm going to stick around for a little bit. If you guys want to stick around, I'll answer any questions you guys have. All right? Thank you so much, guys. God bless you. Thank you, Pastor. Appreciate it.
Come on, give him a hand. Come on, just have a quick seat. All right, we got 15 more minutes. Just want to wrap a few things up. How valuable do you all think this session was? Everybody should have been here, right? Come on. Just a few folks. It's real important. First of all, before I forget, y'all know I got to say stuff. Forgive me if I say stuff out of order, but y'all know how old I am, so now I got to say stuff when I remember it, all right? I want to make sure that you there's a table in the back. I want each and every one of you to go back there. And now some of them, Rudy, may I call you Rudy or Mr. Ortez? Okay. Some of them are from out of different states. Like we got people. So, if I don't know if you would have, they'll be here, up until church service. But I don't know if how you handle that.
Sure. So one of the things that we could do, if you guys are out of state, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. If you're out of state, it's okay. We could either do a Zoom meeting, right, virtual meeting over a computer, or we could at the very least do a phone call. Right, but we're able to do business in all 50 states in Puerto Rico, so we can serve you. It doesn't matter where you're at. That's not going to be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you why, and my goal is every convocation, not just convocation, because, we shouldn't wait till convocation to have these types of meetings. My goal is really that every leader and auxiliary leader and some I see elders,